Hey, what's up everybody? My name is Evan Schneider and welcome back to another video. Today in this video, we're going to be talking about how to color grade V-Log footage using my LUTs. Now, I designed this LUT pack to be more of a tool kit rather than a single tool that you might find in just a normal conversion LUT. If you shoot on V-Log consistently with your camera and you're working with this footage a lot, this pack gives you a lot of starting points and options in terms of how your footage looks right off the bat. That's going to give you a lot more flexibility and save you a lot of time in the process. It also comes with some tools that I call Pre-LUTs. They're basically mimicking in-camera adjustments that you apply before the conversion or the creative LUT. And these offer plus or minus exposure adjustments, contrast, warm, cool, and also a wide dynamic range option as well. If you are interested in purchasing these LUTs, you can check them out at lutcompany.com. There's a link down below in the description. In this video, I'm going to show you how these LUTs work, a basic workflow for working with them in DaVinci Resolve, and I'm also going to compare them to what a CST in Resolve looks like, and I'm going to talk about kind of the differences between using a LUT versus using a CST, the benefits, the drawbacks, and I'm going to try to give you kind of an overall picture of what it looks like to work with these LUTs. I spent a lot of time developing these LUTs, making sure they work on as many types of footage as possible and making sure that they give you the most accurate and natural colors possible. I've received incredibly positive feedback on all of the other conversion LUTs that I offer. People rave about how easy they are to use, how natural the results look, and how happy they are with the LUTs. With any LUT pack that you're purchasing, you want to know the person who created them. You want to make sure that the LUTs are trustworthy and that they are made accurately. So this is why, as a professional colorist, I find myself to be a very trustworthy person to purchase a LUT pack from because I've worked with this footage for a long time. I know the image processing pipeline, and hopefully in this video you can see how it works best and how you're going to get incredible results using them. All right, so here we are in DaVinci Resolve, and I have a bunch of clips here to work with. These were all shot in V-Log. Before we begin as well, we want to make sure we go to our project settings, click on color management, and in our color science, we want to set it to DaVinci YRGB, and our timeline color space to Rec. 709 Gamma 2.4, and our output color space as same as timeline. If you are working in Rec. 709 Gamma 2.2 or Rec. 709A, those are still compatible. I'm personally using Rec. 709 Gamma 2.4 because that is what my reference monitor is calibrated to. I'm going to hide the clips, and over here, I've installed the LUTs into DaVinci Resolve, and if you don't see the LUTs panel, you can click on this icon up here. I've navigated to the V-Log to Rec. 709 plus Creative LUT pack, and inside you'll find there's V-Log and V-LogL. You want to use, of course, the LUTs that correspond with the footage that you shot. Some of the older Panasonic cameras shoot in V-LogL. This was all shot in V-Log, and then you'll see that there are conversion, creative, and pre-LUTs. So the conversion and the creative LUTs both convert V-Log footage to Rec. 709. The conversion LUTs are just kind of basic conversions. So if I double click on one of these, it'll apply it to the node that I have selected. And you can see instantly we've converted the V-Log to Rec. 709. I can also cycle through these. We have natural, we have accurate, we have warm, we have cool, we have +1 contrast, +2, -1, -2, and then wide dynamic range. So I'm going to stick with the natural LUT because I feel like that looks best. And then if we wanted a little bit more of a creative look built in and a one-step process to color grade them, we can go to the creative LUTs. And just by double clicking these, it overwrites the LUT in the node that we're in. So we can click through these. This is Cine, Classic Negative, Dawn, Dune, Ektar, Everyday, Film, Gold, Highlight Boost, Lifted, Luster, MDR, Pit, Pop, Print, Reactor, Sensei, Steel, Suits, and Vintage. So this shot is inherently kind of warm, so all of these kind of push it a little more warm, but you can see just kind of the range of creative looks that you get, and it's really easy to click through these and kind of get a sense of where you want your image to fall. So if you wanted to do one of those, you can. I'm going to opt on this one for a little bit more creative control. So I'm going to use one of the natural conversion LUTs. We'll just throw that on there right here. Then you'll see if we go back, we have our pre-LUTs. These are meant to be applied before the conversion LUT in the pipeline. So that would mean that we would select this node and we can hit Shift S to create a new node before the LUT. And this is where you would apply your pre-LUT. So it's pre-conversion or pre-creative. So these LUTs make exposure, white balance, and dynamic range adjustments in one click. So if we want to increase the exposure, we can do +1, +2 exposure, -1, -2, or we can do cool, we could do warm, or wide dynamic range. And the beauty of these is that you can actually stack them in parallel. So say we want to do -1 exposure, then we could even hit Option S, make a new node, and maybe cool it down. So now we have cooler and -1 exposure. So these are just kind of preset adjustments. You don't have to use these, but sometimes it can save time, especially if you're using them in Premiere Pro where you don't have access to the tools like DaVinci Resolve has. These are really useful to get accurate results. The other thing that we could do is just reset this node grade, and we can do a manual primary adjustment. So let's label this node graph first. So this is our LUT, and then this we're going to call primary. And for the primary adjustments, my favorite tool to use in Resolve is the HDR color wheels. And since we're working with V-Log footage, we can hit these 3 dots up here. Then we can set our color space of these tools to Panasonic V Gamut and our gamma to Panasonic V-Log. And now the high dynamic range color wheels are calibrated to V Gamut and V-Log. So if we make an adjustment, you can see that it responds very naturally, especially when placed underneath our conversion LUT. So I'm going to go ahead and reset the exposure. Maybe we want to bring it down a little bit, and then we'll go to our vector scope and we'll just cool it off a little bit and make sure the skin tones are sitting accurately. And then maybe we want to increase the contrast a little bit and the saturation, and maybe bring up the exposure a little bit there. So in this primary node, we've kind of cooled it off, made it a little more magenta leaning, and decreased the exposure, increased the contrast and saturation. So now we have our primary adjustment, and then we have our LUT. Now, if we wanted to make any sort of window adjustments, power windows, stuff like that, we could do that before the primary node. So say we want to make a power window on her face to bring up her face a little bit. We can just simply draw an outline around here, and then we can go to the tracker and hit the forward and back, track it to her face, and then I'll turn off the window outline, and we can bring up the face exposure a little bit. And then we'll go back to the window and soften the edge. And now if we hit Command D, we can see before and after. And now it's perfectly tracked to her face for the window adjustment. So you would do all of those kinds of adjustments in parallel before the primary node. Next, if we wanted to add some sort of creative look to the footage, we would do that after the creative LUT. You can do it before or after the transform LUT. Some people prefer before. I prefer doing it after because I feel like I have more control with the tools working in what we would call a display referred color space. So anything before the conversion LUT, which would be our primary and our window, would be working in a scene referred space. And then anything after the conversion LUT would be working in a display referred space. Like I said, I like working in a display referred space for my creative adjustments usually. And what you can do here is you can apply a film emulation, you could apply a creative LUT, you could make your own custom curves. I think for this node, let's go ahead and play with the film look creator in Resolve because that's kind of a fun tool and it's super easy to use. This is in the Resolve Studio version. I don't think you have access to this in the free version, unfortunately. We can drag this on here and instantly, right off the bat, we have a really nice cinematic look. We can even adjust this I really like the Rochester look. And we can make it 3D LUT compatible, which means we're turning off grain or any temporal adjustments. It also makes it just process faster. And we can just basically work with these different tools and make them kind of adjust them to our taste. Maybe we'll decrease this, make it feel, give it a little more moodiness, contrast. Maybe bring down the exposure a little bit. This is kind of turning into an extreme look. We can turn our global blend down, maybe 75%. And we'll call this film look. And here we have before the film look and after the film look. So we've created a really nice color grade using this film look, and we can go ahead and clean up the node graph so that we have a nice proper graph. And that's our color graded V-Log footage. So to give you kind of an overview of everything we did on this shot, we'll turn everything off. This is our ungraded V-Log footage from Panasonic. And then we have our conversion LUT that we did first. This is off and this is on. This is our LUTCO V-Log to Rec 709 conversion natural V1. Next, we did our primary adjustment to bring down the exposure, bring down the white balance, add some contrast and saturation. Then we added a window on her face to bring up her face a little bit. And then we added a film look at the very end of the pipeline. So with this, we've used 4 nodes and we have a really nice looking image. So this is before and this is after, and we've only done it in just a few easy steps. Now, the beauty of using these LUTs is that we can actually go back and adjust the conversion or the creative LUT that we used on this footage. So say we want to try something that gives us a little more dynamic range in the conversion, we can just simply double click on wide DR and we can see that it updates very naturally in the background because it's maintaining the middle gray point. So the wide DR actually brings out some vibrance in the face, which I really like. So maybe we stick with that one. We could also go back to the creative V-Log LUTs and we could try one of these. It's probably going to result in a little bit of a stronger creative look, but also still really pleasing to the eye. I really like the cine look. That's super nice. And it just opens up so many different possibilities. Like, I think it takes out the pressure of getting a technically accurate image because you know that with this workflow you are getting it, and you can just focus on the creative aspect of the color grading, which is really nice. So let's go back to our conversion. I'm going to use wide DR because I feel like that's pretty nice. And then maybe go back into my film look and just increase the contrast a little bit. I was enjoying that high contrast look, and that looks pretty nice right there. So this is before the film look and this is after. Okay, so now I'm sure you're curious how these conversion LUTs compare to using a CST in Resolve, both from a technical standpoint and from how the image looks right off the bat. So let's go ahead and we'll save a still of this. I'll grab a still and we can see that still in our gallery right here so we can reference back to it. While we're here, let's go ahead and create a still. I'll turn off everything except for the conversion LUT and we'll go back to the natural conversion and I will grab a still of that. So we have a still of our creative look and we have a still of just the natural conversion LUT. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a new version of our node graph by hitting Command Y. I'm going to go ahead and reset this LUT node and I'm going to call it CST. It's going to happen in the exact same order. It's just that the CST now replaces the function of the LUT. So I'm going to go to my effects, go to color space transform and drag that onto this node. And then in this node, we're going to set our input color space and gamma to Panasonic V-Log. So Panasonic V gamut, that's the color space, and Panasonic V-Log, that's the gamma. And our output color space is use timeline and use timeline as the gamma, which, like I said, we've set it to Rec. 709 gamma 2.4. So we don't have to worry about those settings. For tone mapping, we're going to use DaVinci. Don't worry about that. DaVinci is usually the best option in terms of tone mapping. And then gamut mapping method, we're going to set to none. All of these settings you don't really have to worry about most of the time. They're kind of more advanced conversion and look development settings. So now we can close that tab, and you can see that here we have our CST. We could even turn on our primary adjustment. We can turn on the window, and we can turn on our film look. And then now we could even compare that to our still from using the Conversion LUT. So this is using our CST, and then this is using our Conversion LUT. So you can see that there is a bit of a difference in terms of her skin tone, in terms of the gamma response, but they are still two different looks, and you might have a preference between one or the other. Personally, this one is warmer, a little bit more inviting, a little bit more vibrant. This one is a little bit cooler, has a different conversion, and feels a little more intense. And if we turn off our primary, our window, and our film look, we can compare the CST to just our normal conversion. So this is our CST conversion, and then this is the LUTCO Rec. 709 conversion from V-Log. So CST and then LUTCO, CST and LUTCO. And you can see with the LUTCO, it's retaining a little bit more shadow detail. It's a little bit softer highlight roll off, and it tends to be a little bit warmer and a little bit greener. I feel like the CST can feel kind of lifeless sometimes, and it has a more scientific approach, obviously, because it's converting using the math based on the V-Log and V-Gamut specs. So the trade-offs between using a CST versus a LUT: if you're using a CST, obviously you have the flexibility to convert from any color space and gamma to any other color space and gamma. So it opens up the opportunities for more advanced workflows like converting from V-Log to DaVinci wide gamma intermediate, color grading in the intermediate color space, and then outputting to your display profile. Obviously, a LUT doesn't allow you to convert into a DWG workflow. However, a LUT is a lot more universal. It's something that you can load into your camera and monitor with, and it's something that is universal across different programs. So if you wanted to maintain the same look across Premiere Pro, DaVinci Resolve, in-camera, all of that stuff, a LUT is a great way to maintain that consistency, and you can place it in the exact same node in your workflow as a CST. A lot of people will knock on LUTs for being destructive, which they interpret that as being something that ruins your footage. But in reality, a LUT being destructive basically just means that there's no pass-through of data after the LUT. So if something is clipped by the LUT, you're not going to be able to access that data after the LUT in the node tree, where a color space transform, you can still access clipped data after the CST in Resolve. But if you're not worrying about clipped data, and if you're using a proper workflow, there's really a negligible quality difference between using a LUT and using a CST. I would say it's more workflow, and it's more kind of how the tools feel and what you prefer to work in and how you prefer to work in Resolve and how easy you want it to be. Obviously, the CST doesn't have creative looks built in, so you would have to do that manually. The V-Log LUTs give you a lot of different creative looks, and like I said, you can play with them and toggle between different ones very easily. So let's pull up the rest of our clips and let's practice applying this grade to multiple clips in the timeline. So the first thing we can do is go back to our previous version with the LUT, and we're going to turn on our primary adjustment. We'll turn on our film look since we like that, and then we'll turn back on our window. And the first thing I'm going to do to kind of apply this to the rest of the clips is I'm just going to reset our window node, because that might not be applicable in the other shots. And then I'm also going to go to my primary node, and I'm going to reset the HDR color wheels. Before we do that, we don't want to reset it in the node grade because we have our color space and gamma set on here. So what we want to do is just click on these three dots and then reset color adjustments, and that'll make sure that it maintains our color space and gamma settings, but all of the tools will be reset. So now that we have this, what I like to do is hit Command 1 to save it to memory 1. And then we can click on these clips and highlight all of them, and then hit Command 1 and paste them to the 3 clips. Alternatively, if we want to reset those, we can hit Command Home. We can just right click on this first clip and hit Apply Grade, and it puts that node tree on all of the other clips. The next thing we would want to do is go through the rest of the clips and adjust them. Obviously, we have quite a strong look happening from this node, so we might need to do a little bit of adjusting to exposure and white balance. So we can bring up the exposure here, maybe warm up the image a little bit, and maybe decrease the contrast on the primary node, and then bring the exposure down a little bit. And that's looking a lot better. We can play through that and see how that looks. This clip, I actually kind of like how it looks. I might just bring the exposure down a tiny bit. And then this clip, I actually like how that looks as well. We could bring the exposure down, maybe cool it off a little bit more and see what that looks like. And now we have the rest of the clips in our sequence graded. The other thing that we could do is, if we like the film look that we have, we could turn that off on all of our nodes and copy it and go up to the timeline level node tree, create a new node and paste it in the timeline level, and we'll turn it on there. And then we just have to remember to turn it off in all of the other clips. And now the film look is happening at the timeline level, and we can adjust that, and it'll affect all of the clips in the timeline without having to adjust every single one individually. The last kind of workflow that I want to share with using LUTs that isn't possible with CSTs is kind of a manual color manage mode using LUTs. And this would be useful if you're just trying to add a creative look really quickly, or if you're doing a quick cut before your color grade or an edit and you just want to convert the footage so you can look at a normalized image. So I'm going to go ahead and reset the grade on all of these nodes, and I will reset the timeline and the clip level. So now we're back to just our normal V-Log footage. And I'm going to go to my media pool. And in our media pool, we have our different clips that we're using here. I'll select the clips that I've used. And then all you have to do is right click on the clip and then go to LUT and select the LUT that you want to use to convert the footage. So I'm going to go down to V-Log to Rec. 709, V-Log, Conversion, and then Natural, and I'll click that. And now it's applied it as an input LUT on the clip level. So if we go to our edit page now, we can see that all of the clips are color graded automatically. And if we go to our color page on our node graph, you can see that nothing is happening on the node tree. It's all just happening in the clip level. So if you have a lot of clips that you just want to convert quickly, you can just select them in the media pool and then apply the LUT from there. I would say that if you are doing a proper color grade after this, I would recommend turning off the LUT, change it to no LUT selected, and then go back to your color page and set up the same node tree. Because if you apply the LUT on the clip level, then you're not able to access before the LUT like we did the primary adjustments. So for the proper color grade, you're going to want to turn that LUT off and create a proper workflow with your node tree. One last little technical note when you're using these LUTs is that if you want to kind of adjust the intensity of the LUT, I don't recommend actually adjusting the intensity of the node. So a lot of times the natural thing to do is to apply the LUT to the node and then think it's too intense, go to the key and turn down the key output to adjust the intensity. The problem with doing this is that you're also adjusting the intensity of the color space conversion from V-gamut to Rec. 709, and that's going to result in less accurate looking colors. So you don't want to adjust the key output, but a simple way around that is to just, in a node before the LUT, if you feel like it's adding too much contrast or too much saturation, you can simply go to your HDR wheels or even the primary color wheels and just bring down the contrast, bring down the saturation, and that kind of compensates for the contrast and the color space transform that the LUT is doing. Another technical note on the exposure of your footage, I always recommend shooting log footage at a proper exposure, which if you're getting technical about it, that means that you want to expose middle gray according to the Panasonic V-Log specifications. But in reality, most people are not going to be dialing in their exposure that accurately. And the beauty of log footage is that you're able to get more flexibility in terms of adjusting the image afterwards, regardless of where your exposure is. The main thing is that when you apply the conversion LUT, if your image is over or underexposed, the conversion LUT is going to accentuate what that looks like. So if it's overexposed, it's going to look very overexposed. If it's underexposed, it's going to look very dark. And the things to look for when you're filming, especially, is that you're not clipping your highlights. So if you've clipped your highlights in your footage, this shot was exposed properly, but if the highlights are clipped, you'll see a straight line kind of at the top of the waveform here, or if you have your parade scopes on, you'll see a hard line at the top here. And that means that your highlights have been clipped. Unfortunately, with log footage, that is not recoverable. That's why I tell people, if anything, make sure to save your highlights if you can. And it's always easier to bring up shadows and even add a little bit more noise reduction than to try to save highlights. And especially if they've been clipped, then it's just not possible. Even if it's a little bit underexposed, we can always, like I said, go to our global HDR wheels and we can bring it up, and you can see that even when we make it really bright, since we have our conversion LUT happening after the primary adjustment, we're simply compressing our highlights into that upper range and making them kind of fall off naturally instead of just straight clipping them. So you can kind of see how the LUT protects you from that and creates really natural results at the same time. All right, so hopefully you have a better idea of kind of what these LUTs do, how they work. If you are interested in purchasing these LUTs, you can check them out at lutcompany.com. There's a link down below in the description. Like I said, I also offer other conversion LUTs for Sony, Canon, Fuji, Apple, and I also offer a Super 8 emulation called Fake 8 Film Lab. You can check those all out at lutcompany.com. If you have any questions, definitely leave them down in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.